Ahoy, everyone. This is David Perry with my continuing series of interviews with friends, colleagues, writers, and artists around the world, telling us how they get from the great pause into the great return. And I'm very, very excited, delighted, and just kind of giddy to have in this room with me today someone who's become a dear friend and colleague, the great Lucinda Hawksley, author. Welcome, Lucinda.
Thank you very much.
You know, I recall our first meeting, appropriately enough, for an Italian-loving American and an Italian-loving Brit over a wonderful lunch with many glasses of wine in Florence.
That's absolutely right, yes. And how long ago does that seem now, when the thought of going to Italy at the moment for both of us seems impossible?
Right. Well, I'm going to let you deliver your own biography because it is a fascinating and impressive one for your own work, but also because of a family historical connection. So take it away, Lucinda.
Okay, well, I'm a writer and I focus mostly on non-fiction. I've written 3 biographies. I'm going to just do a little bit of showing what they are. This is The Mystery of Princess Louise, who was a sculptor, Queen Victoria's daughter, very, very interesting woman, really fascinating, very scandalous. And the Royal Archives are still closed. So I'd love to know all the things she got up to, but nobody's allowed to find out. This is actually my first biography. As you can see, it's very well thumbed. This is on Lizzie Siddle, the pre-Raphaelite supermodel, who is most famous for modeling for Millet's Ophelia. And it's like your first baby, maybe, I don't know, very close to my heart because she was my first one. And then this one is a biography of Charles Dickens' daughter, Katie, who was also an artist. So obviously a theme, I'm an art historian. She was also my great aunt, because I'm descended from Charles and Catherine Dickens' 8th child, Henry Fielding Dickens, so her brother. So Charles Dickens was my great grandfather. And I loved writing about Katie. She was just an absolutely fascinating woman, very interesting, very feisty. And I've done a great deal of work around art history, also the women's movement. I've written or co-authored over 20 books. And yes, it's just an extraordinary time really for all writers while we're all sitting at home working on the next project, thinking, I hope I've never written a book that included 2020 and didn't mention COVID.
Well, it's funny you say that. So, I mean, talking about shameless plugs, you can see my novel over my shoulder. And I have to thank you. You were one of the first people to give me a review, and I was petrified to give my book to the great-granddaughter of Charles Dickens, because I thought, well, if she doesn't like it, she'll probably be polite and say, oh, I didn't get to read it. But since you said lovely things, I shamelessly put it on the cover. And my publisher, Quill Driver Books, is thrilled. It's already critically acclaimed and it's selling like hotcakes. So thank you.
That's just fantastic news. Well done. Wow.
So what is it like carrying the legacy of the name Dickens? Because it seems obvious that you would become a writer, but also there's kind of a sideline business that you've picked up, especially around Christmas. Talk about that.
Yes, well, I do write a lot about Dickens as well. I've only mentioned the Katie book here, but I recently wrote a book called Dickens and Christmas. So I do a lot of Christmas events, mainly because it was the book I was looking for when I was researching Dickens and Christmas. And I realized it hadn't yet been written. So most people don't seem to realize that he wrote 5 Christmas books, not just A Christmas Carol. Christmas Carol is the one that's best remembered. And I've really enjoyed doing kind of Dickens festivals. I mean, for the last few years, I've been coming out to Texas every year to the Dickens on the Strand Festival in Galveston. I've been invited all over the world to Dickens conferences, Dickens events. I was in Australia last year and New Zealand last year. And it's just really fascinating how much Dickens is loved all over the world. So it's this rather wonderful timeline. And in fact, I'm writing a thing on Dickens and travel at the moment, which is really, really intriguing at the moment, kind of doing, looking at how Dickens is still loved all these years on and how different traveling was when he was doing it, but how much he did. He was an inveterate traveler. And actually, you may or may not know this, but he spent a year living in Italy. He wrote a travelogue about Italy. So I've been immersed in travels around Italy the last few months.
So usually you travel a lot, talking about Dickens, talking about your novels, just doing what people like you and me like to do, travel and meet people. How has COVID, besides the obvious, completely just gobsmacked your year? Are you doing these conferences virtually, or is it just all off the...
Some things have been turned into virtual things, but I mean, most of them have been postponed or cancelled it's really hard work. I mean, I actually had 2 events in the UK for next spring of 2021, that today I discovered have been postponed to spring of 2022. And people just don't know what's going to happen. It's a very strange time. I mean, I've worked as a travel writer for several years. I was a travel writer for Sky Travel, a website. And, you know, I'm just used to traveling all the time. I mean, last year I was in the States several times. I was in the Antipodes. I, you know, had all sorts of trips planned for this year. And it's been a very, very weird time. Probably very good for the planet. I'm very eco-friendly, except that I fly. And it's probably very good for my personal eco footprint that I'm not flying at the moment. But, you know, it's just extraordinary, because even getting a train at the moment seems almost an impossible dream, to do an adventurous journey.
Yeah. Well, talk to me a little bit now about what it is like in London. I have spent, well, I visited London a lot. I remember a wonderful kind of mini pub crawl with you, my husband, Carlos. So seems like another epoch ago, and in a sense, it was. Are people gathering in pubs in London now? What is it like?
It is very different. And a couple of people have said to me, London just isn't London at the moment. In some ways, it's rather wonderful. You get to walk around areas that are completely unpopulated, and that's extraordinary. I have been resisting for the last few months getting on any sort of public transport. I love walking, and I've just been walking everywhere. But yesterday, for the first time, I got on the tube and I was quite freaked out. Actually, it felt very safe because there was almost no one on the tube. And even while other parts of the UK, people seem to be thinking it's getting back to normal, I think because in London, most people who go to work in London commute on public transport rather than in their own cars. People are still working from home. And I walked through Covent Garden. So for anybody watching this who knows Covent Garden will know how crazy it normally is. Yesterday, there was barely a soul there in the middle of the day. Having said which, later on in the evening, at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, suddenly there were people sitting outside pubs and bars. Not to the same extent there would be normally, but there obviously are workers who are finishing and going to the pub, but nothing compared to what it's normally like. But it's rather wonderful. I mean, in the height of lockdown, I walked through Portobello in Notting Hill, along Portobello Road, where there's normally a thriving market. I didn't see a single other person. It was extraordinary. So it's lovely in some ways, getting to see the city completely as a Londoner without anyone else there, but we're missing the tourists hugely, and I work a lot with tourists. So, and I work with American students normally. I teach undergraduates, and of course none of them are coming over. So all my work is now online. There's almost nothing that I need to do outside the home, which feels really strange. Not just the writing, but also any teaching.
Right. What part of London do you live in?
In West London. And it's just... Sorry.
No, please.
It's just everywhere in London feels like a little village. So wherever you live, you're seeing quite a few people there. But whenever you travel, you're not really seeing people traveling. So, and going into shops is very strange. Everybody's keeping back, you know, going to the supermarket or whatever, which is great. People are being really respectful. Everybody in my part of London definitely is wearing masks. They're wearing masks and they're really keeping their distance. Other friends who live in different parts of London have said it's been less good there. But actually, I think London, compared to where my mother lives in the country and other places I've been, where people are much more reluctant to wear masks and think they'll be fine, people in London seem to be taking it much, much more seriously. And I guess it's a city thing, I don't know. People are more aware of the dangers because we live closer together. But interestingly, the parts of Britain that are going back into, we call it lockdown here, I don't think you call it that in the US, but when everything gets closed down, you know, they're going back into a new enforced lockdown, and that's been around. It probably will happen in London at some point, particularly once the schools start to go back. But at the moment, London, bizarrely, is apparently one of the safest places in the country, even though it's got the biggest part of the population. I mean, it's got something like a sixth of the entire British population lives in London or in nearby. But yeah, elsewhere in the country, people aren't being quite as safe, I think.
So the protocols in England, are they mandatory, legislated for the entire country, or just, you know, are things different in Wales than in England, in Scotland versus other parts of the UK? What is there a law to wear masks? As you know, mask wearing in the United States has become, well, a thing.
Yeah, you are told that you should wear a mask when you go into shops and when you go on public transport. However, quite understandably, the shop staff do not want to have to enforce that. And there are, of course, people who have medical conditions that mean they can't wear a mask. And there's, a lot of awareness of you can't always see a disability, so don't judge someone if they're not wearing a mask. I'm finding the vast majority of people are wearing them. There's the occasional person who can't be bothered and is slightly doing it as a protest, but most people are wearing them. But then, I don't know, it's been very different. The governance in Scotland, for example, personally, I think the Scottish government have behaved far better than the government in England. And it goes with different kind of devolved governments kind of in Wales and Scotland. So although, there's technically a United Kingdom Parliament, well, Wales and Scotland have been making their own rules, and they seem to have been, in my view, more intelligent than the rules that the British government are putting out there. The whole message over here has been absolutely extraordinarily bizarre. I mean, it's been great comedy fodder. Comedy script writers must just love Boris Johnson because he can barely string together a coherent sentence. There was a famous speech he made on a Sunday evening at 7:00 when he suddenly announced that everyone could go back to work the next morning at 9:00, but employers hadn't been given any guidelines. And he was saying things like, you can go out, but don't go out. But you should stay at home, but don't stay at home. It was hilarious. It was like, is this a comedy performance? This is a pre-record. This is something that could have been edited and could have been actually scripted. And I don't know, I do wonder if it is deliberate chaos so that if people get ill, they can't blame the government because they didn't follow the unfollowable rules. If people were alive now, there would be a whole new Pickwick Papers around British governance during COVID. The only good thing about it is it gives us all a laugh. That's the silver lining. You just have to go, oh, another completely nonsensical announcement from the government.
Yeah, I have to admit that the comedians and the stand-up comics here in the United States, they heard that speech too. I saw it online and I was just like, wow. But we've got our own comedian in leadership too, but I won't get too much into that or we'll never get on with the interview. I have good friends in London. Another person who I believe I introduced you to, our friend and colleague Armistead Maupin and his husband Christopher Turner. He's been doing wonderful things during lockdown. He was reading sections from his new novel and whatnot. And the other day he did a marvelous live stream with his dear friend and someone I'm pleased to have said I've met once, Sir Ian McKellen. There's all this creativity going on. I don't know about you. I find it hard as a writer to write in the midst of this. It's like, I don't really want to write about COVID because I'm kind of living it. How has it been for you?
It makes me feel a lot better to hear you saying that. I was finding it the most unproductive time. People think that it would be a great time to write a novel or to work on your book. I found the stress, the anxiety at the beginning was really difficult because I just couldn't relax into writing and I was finding it very, very stressful. But I then joined a Society of Authors meeting online and I joined a few minutes late and everyone there was in the midst of a long conversation about how unproductive they were being and how nobody could write. And it made me feel so much better. And I do think that in some ways it's great to have this enforced time, but the problem is that everybody's got this enforced time, so you spend your whole life with people saying let's have a Zoom meeting or giving you a call because everybody's working from home. And I think there's a lot of people who don't know how to harness the power of working at home, who are working from home for the first time, and they just constantly send you text messages or want to meet up, and it's quite hilarious really. It's like, you're the amateur home workers, those of us who've been working from home for years, we know how to control this power. But also because you spent your whole time checking in with people. I mean, we were just ringing each other all the time. And it's lovely in some ways because people who were lonely before are saying they've never had so much communication. But that also does have its downsides in that we are nervous of getting on with work in case we feel like we should be doing something else instead. So for me, it hasn't been the most productive of times. And I've been frustrated by that. But I think it's all in there. I think what's happening is we're processing things in a particular way that will probably be a flower of creativity after this is all over. But for me personally, the anxiety is tough when you're trying to do something creative. And I'm sure you feel the same because you need to feel creative.
I do. You call it all spinning up there. I call it marinating. I have a lot of things marinating up there in my brain. And I know it's so strange. When the marinade is done, I'll know then it's time to kind of take it out and start to bake it. I do know that COVID for me, I felt that with my novel being printed this year, which miraculously is on schedule, I just thought when it started, it's like, well, that's
Yeah.
gone. But people evidently are reading more. But I felt that I needed to do an author's note. So before it was printed, it's being sent to the printer now. I called my publisher and I said, do I have the time to put in an author's note? He said, well, what do you want to say? And I said, I just think I need to acknowledge that this is happening during a period of global historic proportion. And I need to be able to say, while this is being printed, friends are dealing with this in Italy, especially hard when I wrote the author's note, and then Spain, my husband's home country, and in England. I didn't feel that I could publish a book during this period without acknowledging COVID. But like you, I started working on something before it happened, and since COVID, I just can't do anything except focus on living every day.
Yeah.
I think the phrase, how are you, used to be kind of a toss off. But now during COVID, I think it's become something truly sincere. When you call someone or Zoom someone and say, how are you? How are you, Lucinda? How is your family?
Oh, well, we're all surviving. Yeah, I mean, it is a very strange time. And of course, during lockdown, I was lucky. I went down to stay with my mum during lockdown in the countryside. She has dogs, which I don't. And I was had my mum and the dogs in a big garden. And we both said that was just such a huge relief to know that we had each other. But my sisters couldn't go and see her at all. We couldn't see each other. Couldn't see anybody else I wanted to see. And that was tough, really tough. And I think for some people who haven't been able to see anyone else, an elderly friend of my mum's came to visit us recently when her grandson drove her down, and she went to give me a hug, and I kind of pulled back. She's 90 and I was terrified. As far as I know, I'm fine, but I don't know. Obviously, none of us know if we're asymptomatic. And I said, oh no, I mustn't hug you. And she just looked devastated, and she said, she was French, and she said, I haven't had a kiss for 4 months. And that broke my heart. I just thought, oh, that's so heartbreaking that she is feeling so alone and I can't even give her a hug. And that was just painful. And I have a couple of bubbles. I have a bubble with my partner and a bubble with my mum, and I can go and see them. But, during actual lockdown, you had to choose that one place that you go to. And that was supposed to be for 3 weeks, and it was 10 weeks. It's just going on and on. And even now, going to see people, it's fine because the weather's beautiful. We've had unbelievably beautiful weather in England since March, which no one will believe, but it's true. It's been kind of over 90 degrees regularly for the last few months. It's extraordinary. So you can meet outside, sit in somebody's garden, keep your distance. But I do dread what will happen when the autumn and the winter set in, and no longer can you sit outside. There will be people who will just have to go into people's houses or not see anybody. And then, of course, there's a great fear that it could all start up again. So there's this general kind of anxiety and tenseness, I think, amongst everybody. And as you said, how are you? You just go, I'm fine. Well, no one says that anymore. Well, there's a whole catalogue of woes. And of course, many people have lost people in this. One of my dear friends died, which was just heartbreaking near the beginning. And I'd heard from him a week or so beforehand, and I thought it's a bit strange I haven't heard from him since. And then I heard he was in hospital. And yeah, so we couldn't have a funeral. Obviously, we had a Zoom memorial. It's just those kind of things that really get close, and I get frustrated. I see people on Twitter saying things like, well, it's all a hoax, and I don't know anyone who's died. None of my friends have had it, and I don't know anyone who's died. And I think, well, aren't you lucky, actually? Because I've known several people who had it extremely badly and a couple of people who've died, and it's the real thing.
Yeah, I hope that I will have the words to describe it. I don't now. The closest I can think of was during the AIDS, HIV years, and I was living in San Francisco and a young single man, so that wasn't easy. I remember the seminal book And the Band Played On came out by Randy Shilts, and it was a tome, a huge book, and it's still considered one of the best books on AIDS. And people would say to me, have you read it? I was like, are you kidding? I can't. I bought it because I felt that but I said, I'm living it. I can't possibly read it.
But it's so interesting you say that, because I've been thinking a lot in this about your lovely friend Armistead Maupin, who you introduced me to. And I think it's the 4th book in the Tales of the City series, which suddenly becomes very, very serious because HIV and AIDS has appeared and people are dying. And I remember reading that book and crying. I've read the whole series many times. I love it. And I keep thinking about that book and remembering it and thinking, this is what it feels like. Obviously, I wasn't in San Francisco, but it just has resonances for me, that book, now, when everybody's fearful about getting, the plague. Everyone is terrified of either catching it or unwittingly passing it on to someone else. And yes, it is a very strange time. And I think it can be equated to that era.
Yeah, well, it will certainly mark us and mark our writing. I'm glad to hear you've been having anxiety too. I tend to consider myself very perky. Alfredo says I'm the Energizer Bunny, but I've done the strangest things. I remember during the worst of it, I think it was late March, April, who remembers what month, we went to the store, which in itself is quite an expedition, came home, and the next morning I went to the refrigerator to get my cream for my coffee, and I couldn't find it. I said, I know I bought it. Later in the day, I had a second cup of coffee, opened the refrigerator, and the cream was there. I said, I guess I didn't see it. So I said, Alfredo, isn't it funny? I guess I didn't see the cream when I opened the refrigerator. He said, David, I didn't want to tell you, but you came home from the store yesterday and you put the cream in the closet. It's like, not even near the refrigerator. It's like, why would I do that? And to me, I've told that story several times, because to me, that was like my brain was just on some other completely.
I have been doing all sorts of things like that, and it is really strange. And I don't normally suffer from anxiety, but I have done in this time. And mostly because I was terrified of giving it to my mum, absolutely petrified about that. But also as an asthmatic at the beginning, I was very scared. They were saying initially that asthmatics had to be really careful, and now they're saying asthmatics are surviving incredibly well. We don't know why. They're superhuman. I don't know. They're all beating COVID. But it is just, I think, that fear of losing people. And with me, I know when it began was when Boris Johnson, my unesteemed leader, made the comment that everybody in this country will lose someone they love, which was a singularly unhelpful thing to say without actually legislating for masks or quarantine, just to throw it out there. And I just became absolutely panicked then. Who is going to be the person in my family who dies, was essentially what I was thinking. And I think that was what really started to cripple the creative process. And the number of people I've spoken to who that precise comment that he made had a hugely detrimental effect. A friend of mine who's a therapist said, I cannot tell you how many of my clients went into meltdown over that comment. And it is, it is unhelpful, because the legislation wasn't there to make people actually take control. So it did feel as if everybody was just running around, like a rabbit in the headlights, without actually knowing what to do.
In our last few minutes, I want to ask you two questions. One is about the general tone of the country, that fair or not British stereotype of, oh, well, the world is going to hell, let's make some tea. There is the stereotype among people in the United States that Brits will have the stiff upper lip, and no matter how bad it gets, they'll keep on keeping on. So I want to ask you what the mood of the country is, and then go right into the last question, which is, what is next for you? Do you see yourself coming into a new productive period out of this? After you do get over the anxiety, we get over the anxiety, what are you going to write next?
Well, the general tone of the country is, I think it totally depends who you speak to, where you are. Britain is utterly divided in everything at the moment, and it is heartbreaking, has been since 2016 with the Brexit referendum, and then of course the Scottish independence, which now seems like it might well be a real thing after the whole Brexit thing. So, and it does seem to be very divided in terms of the way that people are looking at COVID as well. There's the COVID deniers, which does, in my experience, what I've seen, tend to be kind of the Brexiteer view, and then the people who are being absolutely terrified. We keep being told to invoke the Blitz spirit. World War II has been mentioned more times than I can possibly remember. Actually, somebody said to me once, this is so ridiculous. Why are people worrying about COVID? I mean, we got through the Blitz. And I thought, many thousands of people didn't get through the Blitz. That's why it's called the Blitz. They died. But it's strange. Depends on who you talk to. But I also think there's been a huge amount of tea drinking, and things as well. I don't know if you know about Captain Tom Moore, now Captain Sir Tom, who is a nonagenarian who was recently knighted by the Queen, and he raised millions and millions of pounds for the NHS by doing his daily walk in the NHS. Nobody ever heard of him before. His children put it up on, social media, and he's just become the absolute darling of the nation. So to me, that is the best thing about COVID, people like that. These wonderful people who just, really made so much of helping other people, like all the key workers, you know, that's been amazing. I feel like I am in a productive phase again now, which is great. That initial panic, I think we've gone through it, and we know how it works now. I mean, I am aware we might end up going into lockdown again, but it doesn't hold the fears for me it did before, because I know how to do it, if you see what I mean. I've bought flour, for example. You know, it's just that realization that you can still get food when you're at home, and you don't have to eat, you know, asparagus every day. People seem to think they had to go and buy luxury foods every day. They couldn't just make pasta, which was quite hilarious. But I am working on a book on Dickensian travel, which I'm very, very nearly finished with, but I keep working on it because I've got the luxury of time and I don't want to stop. So technically it's finished, but I'm just refusing to give it in. It's my baby. I've actually been working on a novel as well, which I'm nearly at the end of. I've gone back through after having had feedback from my agent, and I've gone through the whole manuscript in the last few weeks, and I'm about to start taking in my changes and then give it to an editor. Who knows whether a publisher will want to publish it or not? I hope they will, but for me, it's just a wonderful thing to have been working on. And it's been, as you know, that incredible process. It's very, very different from writing, you know, a biography, very different from writing nonfiction. And it's freeing. It's a wonderful creative thing to do. So yeah, there's always writing. That's the lovely thing. You know, I feel like I've got through that fear and everything has been unlocked. And it's rather wonderful actually at the moment.
Well, we've been speaking with Lucinda Hawksley, author, Dickens authority, and good English woman keeping on, keeping on. Real quick, so at the end of the day, to relieve anxiety or just relax, is it a cup of tea or is it a cup of something stronger? I'm just curious. Mine has become Irish whiskey, which I never knew I liked before COVID.
I drink very little alcohol, but I do like good champagne. So, but do you know what? I will have a bath, lovely hot bath, put on an audiobook and drink. I don't know, it depends. It depends on the day, to be honest. Sometimes tea, sometimes, I don't know, whatever, non-alcoholic cocktail. I'm not a big alcohol drinker, as I say, unless you're offering champagne, in which case I've got a bit of a weakness.
When I next see you, either in London or Italy, the champagne's on me. I look forward to it. Lucinda Hawksley, thank you for speaking with us. This is David Perry. Ahoy.